Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started in a couple minutes, give people a few more minutes to join, but appreciate everyone joining us today. Hey, well, again, good morning, everyone. Appreciate you all joining. Excited to talk about this topic today, just in general. My name is Ben Bergeron, Vice President of Revenue with In-Telecom, joined today by our Director of Security, Chris Clark. Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself. And you're on mute, man. First rookie mistake.
Hey, dude, I forgot I put it on mute. So, yeah, good morning, everybody. Chris Clark, Director of the Physical Security Division here at In-Telecom.
So today we're going to be talking about AI, what's possible in the world of video surveillance and access control. I think just as a whole, this has been evolving so quickly and so rapidly over the last couple of years. So just agenda for today, just going to be talking about like what the shifts have been over these last 12, 24 months. Some different AI-powered threat detection that we're seeing. Also, like the conversation changing to really operational intelligence and how these systems are really helping to evolve organizations and empower operations to make better decisions quickly. We'll go over a couple different use cases that we're seeing. Also share some insight as far as like what our clients are asking for, what they're seeing, and what role they see their security platforms playing in the company. And just some additional insights on where the industry is heading. So anything else you thinking, Chris?
I think that's a good topic, good place to start and see if we get any questions at the end so we can help.
Yeah, great point. So obviously you won't be able to communicate directly during this, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll definitely have a section towards the end where we'll have some Q&A but maybe we'll pause throughout. But yeah, feel free to post some questions in the chat. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So I think the biggest shift that I'm seeing in general, Chris, is just like this change from just monitoring or being reactive in the system to truly having like proactive intelligence, across the security platforms, whether it's access control, surveillance, weapons detections, all the different things that people are putting into their security ecosystem. What are some of the things you're seeing, like from that mind shift from like traditional security to like true AI powered security?
Yeah, I mean, I think you absolutely said it right. So I've been doing this 12, 13 years now. So I am coming from the background where previously it was plug a camera system in, plug a camera in, and when something happens, somebody would tell you about it 24, 48, 2 weeks later. And then you lose a lot of hours sitting there pressing rewind, fast forward, trying to figure out exactly who it was, where it was, when it happened. The big shift we're seeing now, I think with AI getting developed and getting better and better as it is every day, we're starting to save a lot of time, we're starting to save a lot of effort by leveraging the AI into the camera system, by being more, like you said, proactive, a little bit faster for threat detection, maybe some pre-instance analysis that the AI can do prior to it actually happening, right? So we can get some real-time feedback, and we're starting to see more of the investment side. You're starting to see people looking for the return of investment by leveraging the AI into the camera system instead of just being a passive system that was sitting there and kind of using it as needed. Now it's something that we can tie back in throughout multiple different systems and multiple different platforms throughout the organization that really gives you that true return of investment that you make and then some actual uh, proactive responses to what's going on.
Yeah, it's one of the things I always think about when we talk about these different topics is, obviously being able to scale without necessarily adding a bunch of bodies, it's like certain things that used to maybe take 10 people to do, you can do with seven. But what I really think it does is it changes the conversation around human error, right? I think it's one of the things that people don't talk about enough is that, these legacy and traditional security systems required so much for the human being to get it right, right? Like whether um, in the moment they were dealing with a situation or identifying something, it required human interaction, interpretation of the data, and always left the organization subject to like human error. Where I'm seeing like these different AI advancements in technology, where it's really like reducing that human error and giving clarity to the data quicker. Would you kind of say the same thing, or?
Absolutely, right. We would call it human fatigue, right? So it's for instance when you see great example is your weapon detection systems, right? Your traditional weapon detection systems is your metal detectors, and then if you get a little beep, now the next person standing there has a wand. Well, if you're wanding your 2000th person in the last 2 hours, and these are generally volunteers or low paid employees that stand there as side jobs wanding people by that 2000th person that they're wanting, they're ready just to get done with the day. So human fatigue is a true thing that you see throughout all of the security industry, whether it's watching video cameras, right, or watching video feed, trying to pop your eyes around 16 different little tiny squares for live, or pressing rewind and fast forward, trying to look for that little small behavioral detail. Human fatigue is what's going to be the greatest limiter to human interaction, actually watching what's going on. Where when you can put AI in place, you eliminate the fatigue factor. You eliminate, you know, constant having to bounce screen to screen and watching. And AI and the new advances in the industry eliminate a lot of that and reduce a lot of, uh, the errors or easy misses that happen.
One of the things on here too is like predictive operational insights, right? And I think like when you're speaking to your executive team, you have these different operational stakeholders within the organization. Well, maybe they're not their day to day isn't necessarily encompassed in like the security ecosystem within the organization, right? Like that's not really part of their job function. But I'd be kind of curious, like one of the things, like when you're meeting with our clients and you're in front of their executive team, where maybe like, yes, security is a big deal, right? How are you communicating some of these things that are like providing more insights to the organization, providing more operational detail? Can you go through some of those like use cases that you're experiencing?
Yeah, so we're doing more of a like an incident response, right? So we try to be very specific and strategic based on the industry, based on the use and the need of each particular product and each particular AI tool that we could leverage. So when you start leveraging these together, kind of goes back to the return of investment is the big question, right? We all know uh, AI products aren't the cheapest products in the world, right? So this isn't a small investment that these companies and leaders are asked to make, but it always comes down to what am I going to get out of it? And when we can start putting together some of these products like a camera system integrating with an access control system and integrating with, hey, if two people walk through this door at the same time without scanning a badge, I want to be notified. Or if people are renting my shop room floor that need to be wearing PPE, they shouldn't, right? You shouldn't be entering this workspace without being properly protected, or detecting a gun as it's being drawn or brandishing a weapon, right? So It really comes down to use case and instance for each individual need and each individual company. And we go back to leverage, what's the risk that you're taking today, worrying about human fatigue, right? We can go back to human fatigue and how much downtime are you having if there is an incident that happened, say, 3 days ago, or that happened. You got to remember a lot of states have extenuating laws of how long you could go back. So for Louisiana, for example, you got 364 days to file a claim against a business for, slip and falls or any kind of incident like that that happens. So if you're not notified about it, this is where we bring these use cases up in these meetings. Is these things are happening real, right? These are real things that are happening every day. That's costing businesses money, it's costing businesses time, and time is money. So at the end of the day, it's how much time can we give back by leveraging AI? How many risks can we mitigate by having some of these systems talk to one another? And empowering all the tools at our hands nowadays, since everything is open and available, to make the best decision for the company and put the best tools in work for them.
I think there's some really good points. And before I kind of pivot to our next slide here and some of the other topics that we want to talk about, I wanted to, I see Michael put in a question, and I think it's a pretty interesting question that, I've heard a couple times over the last few months. Is just like, how are companies handling any legal concerns about using AI, or are there any legal concerns? Is that something you've heard from anyone today?
So AI, right? AI is going to have some legal concerns when being used within an organization, right? So here in Telecom, we have our own policies, right, for AI. But when it comes to putting it on the platform, so these are tools that live in their own network. The AI is going to live within the camera system, will live within the access control system. It's only going to have access to what information you allow it to have access to. So I have not seen any legal concerns with leveraging AI through the security platforms. That's a great question. It's something that we do hear all the time, especially from our other side of the business on the MSP side and cybersecurity side with AI and legal risk. But as of yet, as of today, as much as it's been deployed, it's being actively used in multiple government facilities, right? So we've not seen any legal concerns with AI, being that what it's being used for and the information that's being provided is limited just based
Yeah.
on what.
I think the bigger concern is not on the legal front, but more on compliance and risk, right? Where number one, if you're having to adhere to some form of compliancy, it's critical that you understand like where data is, where it's flowing to. I think it's really important that organizations have AI use policies internally, right? I think it's also important to understand vendors and like, do they have, what's their AI use policy? Do they have one? Right? Like, we've rolled them out internally. We're rolling them out for our clients. I think that is the biggest thing, is mitigating risk, right? And making sure you're adhering to whatever compliance that your organization needs to adhere to for the clients that it serves.
You're absolutely right. So we're gonna take a look at how the whole network's set up, right? So as we start plugging these things in, first off, we're always going to recommend using a device that is NDAA compliant. So it's gonna adhere to all the legal qualifications and requirements for security nowadays. And then when you start laying the AI tools into it, you're providing it access to the video feed, right? Then we start using our brains from the MSP side and start VLANing out networks and start segregating your networks to where if that is a concern, a legal concern, or AI entering, into different networks that have customer data on it, we're going to separate those out. So it's absolutely something we step back and look at as a whole picture for each individual client, and that's always best practice that we recommend.
That's a really good point, especially on the networking front. So one of the key things here that I think transitions well into the next topic that we want to talk about is really like that legacy reactive incident management, right? And when we look forward to like where AI is taking us, where it is today, right, which is really centered around AI powered threat detection, right? And it's about response times, right? It's about the identification of threats very quickly so the team can react. Is there anything you'd like to kind of touch on here or where you'd like to start?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets exciting, right? So this is the world that we're living in. This is what we want to use the AI for. So this is the exciting part that we start talking about when we start talking about what it can do for you and why we should be empowering AI, right? AI is being empowered every day. Every time you pick up your phone, you're touching an AI product and you're leveraging some AI tool. And so why shouldn't we be using it for protection and security? And that's kind of the axe that I always start off a lot of my conversations with around AI is if you're going to use it when you're looking up, cooking recipes or looking up whatever it is nowadays, AI is being brought into that fold. Why wouldn't we want to use it for security and threat detection and threat prevention? So a lot of these things that we have itemized and listed off here, just some of the common use cases, right? Detecting unusual loitering. So the AI tools and the systems can tell, right? If people been hanging out in an area for too long, that's uncommon. So it's not just seeing or taking images and seeing people have been standing there for a while, right? Maybe that's common. Maybe that's a work area and they should be standing there for a while. But AI is going to be able to detect if this is a usual place that people are loitering. Is this a usual time that people are standing in this area, right? What we use AI for is to mitigate false alarms. So
Hmm.
in the past, you would be constantly getting notifications of motion and notifications of, object detected. And so you would hurry up and hop on your phone and see it was the flag blowing in the wind or a cat walking by, right? So AI is being employed on all of these video streams and determining if that's a human or a vehicle, right? So that's the first use of AI nowadays in your video appliances is to determine is the video feed that it's notifying you about, is it something important? And it's basing that on your first use of is it human or is it a vehicle, right? Or if you want to detect something else, right? That's where we start getting in deeper with AI. Do we want to know, if there's smoke, right? The AI can detect that. Do we want to see if there's a flame? Do we want to see a cat or an animal in the picture, right? Maybe we want to know different things other than human or vehicle. AI has the ability, right? So we get to tell it we want to be notified when there's three people walking in a straight line in this direction, right? Maybe that's not common. So we get to use AI and build it for what our use case is individually, right? There's some that's going to come very common. But then with the tools today and the abilities of the systems, we get to tell it what we want to know. If you want to know if your employees are joisting on forklifts in the middle of your warehouse, right? Don't think that's not happened before. That is a we've
No, that never happens.
joisting matches, right, on forklifts. So AI gives you the ability, right? So where there's a use case, where there's a need and a concern, there's generally a way that we can find and mitigate that risk faster for you and help reduce a lot of downtime. And by downtime, just don't mean like y'all shut down, but that means putting an employee behind a computer and pressing rewind and fast forward for 3, 4, 5 hours when it could have been as easy as typing in a line that says, I want to see a lady that was holding a bag with a white shirt and blue pants that came through the system yesterday, right? And click a button and it pulls you that feed. So, you get to do that with your camera system, you get to do that with your access control system, and you can have the two talk together and say if Ben scans his card, or if Ben's card is scanned to get into this door, but hey, camera, I want you to tell me, is that Ben's face? Because you have a picture of Ben from him scanning his access control card. I want to know if that really is Ben, or did Ben lose his credential and somebody's entering my premises, that shouldn't be here. So a lot of different use cases, a lot of different ways you can use it.
No, it's funny. I think back to my days in loss prevention where and in retail where, like it used to just be like where I would set a notification for any time somebody would go down this aisle, right? And I would deal with all these alerts, right? And everything was just so reactive to that moment, right? And the constant logging of data and the constant of reviewing of data to identify different things, or whether you were trying to identify somebody. I think you made a really good point, where it's maybe you lose sight of an individual or something in that moment, and now now you're trying to go through 10 different videos to find that it's not like that anymore, right? And it's literally, hey, fine, everybody that wearing a red hat, right? And it's going to pull all that information into a single pane of glass for you to navigate much more timely, whether you're responding to active threat or maybe you're reviewing history as well, right? I think that's a pretty critical component in our ability to be proactive so we can react more timely and effectively as a security team. So.
Right. Absolutely. Right. And when we get to take it a step further, you're looking for a person in a red hat because that's all the information that we're given. Well, once you can identify that individual, we can now click on that individual and say, okay, now I want to know when's the first time my camera picked this guy up or this lady up, and then when's the last time, and show me everything in between in chronological order, right? So we get to click a button nowadays and track every camera they pass through from the first time they were seen all the way until they left the premises. And you can see everything that happened in between. Easily export, right? Easily download, bookmark, however your company policy is. But it's just again reducing downtime is the biggest tool that AI can do for us right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good transition to like when, we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's just that operational intelligence, all these things beyond just what you think of when you think security, right? So you mentioned a little bit about occupancy tracking, right? But like there, it's not just about that incident, right? Like that, there's so many other things that can go into occupancy tracking where it really matters if there was an event to better understand who's in the building where, right? I want to talk a little bit about safety and compliance, and then like some of the things we're doing to optimize facilities, and then true business intelligence. But like let's start with the occupancy tracking. What are some ways or use cases that you think occupancy tracking is really relevant?
Well, I feel like there's a lot, right? So we get to employ the AI tool to determine how many people are entering the facility, how many people have exited the facility. We can get a live head count if we have cameras that's kind of overseeing everything. And then we can also see, maybe foot traffic patterns. So this would be great for locations, maybe you got a convenience store, you got an area like a grocery store, and you want to know where people end up the most often, right? So now you get to put items and you get to merchandise your store, merchandise your area appropriately and properly. And these are things that you don't understand without having some kind of heat mapping to determine where people are most standard. And then you can determine flow, and then you can be notified based on a change of flow of the occupant. So if people are normally moving in one direction and then all of a sudden today they're going the other direction, you can be notified on that, right? So if it's let's use vehicles. If you have a driveway that's one way, everybody should be pulling, and a car is moving the opposite direction, the wrong direction, you can be notified on that, right? So these are tools for occupancy tracking and just tracking movement individually, all together. So we get to utilize and make the most sense of, first off, our floor plan, where things are going, understand people and their flows, get some counts of how many people are in the building. If we have muster stations, say we're at a facility or a plant, we can get a really good understanding of how many people have entered the building and how many people have left the building. And then make sure that people are moving as they should. Right. So that's some of the things, just kind of thinking off the top of my head, that we can do with just occupancy or people tracking in general.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool points, right? Like it's about data and being able to make better business decisions as an organization. And there's so many different use cases, right? Some of it's security related, some of it's, upsell opportunities, some of it's just managing people flow and making things more efficient. Well, maybe it's about where to staff, where to put people.
Right.
But it gives leaders the ability to make decisions that are based on data, not in fact, and not just based on feel and instinct, right? So we can feel.
Yeah.
I think it's actually one of my favorite topics to talk about right now is on the safety compliance side. Right, this is one of those areas where I'm seeing so many different use cases that I think is really changing the game for several different industries. I know we're recently we rolled out or recently are in completed a project for one of our clients on this front. Would love for you to talk about some of that.
Yeah, so this client was actually one of the ones that pushed us into upgrading our AI capabilities in the security world. So we had a client come to us, right, that asked about PPE detection, asked how can I have better control, right, an OSHA compliant facility of when my employees are entering a workspace that's a protected workspace that they should be wearing, safety goggles, hard hat, safety vest, and hearing protection. I want to be notified if they're missing any of these. And then not only do I want to be notified, I want to be able to keep a data log of it. I want to keep a weekly running toll of it. And then, what else can I do? So we were able to deploy this solution using a combination of the cameras and access control piece together. So we were able to detect if they were wearing, as they approached the entry door to the facility, are they wearing their hard hat? Are they wearing their safety glasses, hearing protection, and safety vest? And then we get to detect who that was if they were missing it, because now we're tying it back to the access control system, right? So now the next step was, what else can I do with this report? So the next step, we were able to write a code that says, well, if Ben comes up and swipes his card to enter this floor and he's missing his hard hat, I want Ben's manager to be notified that Ben was missing his hard hat when he entered this floor, right? And so this was kind of our big kickoff into employing a lot more AI into the camera systems. We then advanced it onto putting it onto the workshop floor, detecting forklifts driving erratically, detecting spill hazards. So we were able to look at the shop room floors and look if there's any potential slip and fall hazards before it happens. So looking at the surface of the floor, seeing AI is able to look at the surface, know what it previously looked like, know what it's always looked like, and see if there's a change in it today. And when it detects a change, meaning that the surface has changed from what's normal, could be wet, something could be over top of it. We were able to detect and notify and prevent one of those hazards from happening. Right. So we're employing that throughout all of our facilities. I think we're up to 1,800 cameras that we've deployed all of this AI intelligence over. It's detecting people standing on forklifts incorrectly, to joisting with forklifts, to not wearing proper PPE when they enter the floor. So it's funny, right? But
Yeah.
that gets brought up to you. You're like, hey, the question really came, hey, can you detect if, and they kind of paused. And I had to say, well, what do we need? And it's like, can you detect if my workshop employees are having joisting matches with their forklifts? Absolutely, right? So
Yeah.
we tie some things back in and things moving in the same direction and moving towards each other, getting close to collision warnings, and tying that all back into an alert.
No, I think this is really where that ROI comes in for the organization, where you think just about safety in general, safety managers, the reliance on individuals to adhere to company policy and procedures and, the honor system, right? See something, say something, right? And, yes, we need to have a culture, of safety within the organization, but people are still people, you know. So, and it's not like a "I got you" moment. It's about protecting the individuals, right? It's about minimizing lost time accidents. It's about minimizing those liabilities for the organizations, which are people, right? And people making mistakes, So, used to be a thing where, okay, I got access to this area, and like my access badge works, and I can just walk in. But what this is doing is, okay, I might have access to this area, but now before I let this person in, we're going to be on verifying through the video surveillance. Okay, this person has their hard hat, has their reflective vest on, has ear protection on. Okay, now they're allowed in, right? And if they're not wearing those things, we're also going to alert their manager, right? So now we get real-time coaching opportunities that can take place with those individuals prior to the accident ever happening. So I think this is where that ROI is so relevant for business leaders, because the biggest liability is our people, right? So like we want to do everything that we can to protect those people from those different things. So
We can tie that back in, right? Also, so maybe not just checking that, but if we have security guards that walk our
yep,
facility, say we have a floor that needs to be walked regularly, we can put AI on that person and track them through the camera and see if that individual has made their rounds through every area that we're expecting them to, or maybe they're just walking down this straight line and returning, right? Again, human fatigue.
yep,
So we get to detect if employees that should be maybe say a casino floor, for example, and you're expecting your staff members to be walking through all of these areas in intervals, um, and maybe they've decided that they haven't had to walk around that whole side because nobody's noticed that they haven't. So they just stay on one side and kind of relax. So these are tools that get to be put in place for many different reasons, whether it's PPE or safety compliance as far as staffing, right?
yep.
And being where they need to be at the time they should be.
Yeah, look, and I think any leader, anyone who's ever been a leader before, like you think about those things that are routine, that human fatigue, and how we used to validate those things. And it was like, okay, wait, well, we had this little checklist this form that they had to fill out at 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and 7 p.m., right? Every day. And if they didn't check every box and sign off, like it wasn't completed. But even those things can be susceptible to that human fatigue where we're just checking boxes, right? So now we're getting some real-time notification on when those things aren't occurring, or now we can also set trigger events to happen to say like, okay, if XYZ is taking place, we're going to trigger an event for that security guard to then do an additional walk and do all of those things during that moment too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's like one of those things that, it is really highlights that operational intelligence and that empowerment for business leaders in different segments of the workplace. So I want to go over some use cases, right? And the first one we'll talk about is just in healthcare, right? So we service a lot of healthcare clients today. Curious about some of the conversations that you're having as far as priorities and some of the different areas we're helping support those clients.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of list a few of them here. So some of the biggest ones that were really deployed immediately were the slip and fall risk or slip and fall detections, right? So a lot of times, again, we go back to how far back people can go when there was an incident before they come back to you and say, "Hey, I slipped and fell here. I need your insurance information." Um, we have the systems in place now where you don't have to wait for them to come report to you that there was a slip and fall. AI is able to determine if somebody was standing and then they fell, right? So AI is also able to take that video and analyze it and see how did they fall and break it down to see, hey, did this look like a true slip and fall or did somebody, kind of scope out a scene and then go lay down in an area and call it a slip and fall. So that's taking human assumption and humans out of the equation and evaluating a situation, and AI is making that call, and then we get to go back and review it. But we have the tools in place today where if there is a slip and fall, we're able to see that happen real time, document it, and we can even write a rule that says anytime there's a slip and fall, I want you to automatically save this video and send it to me so it doesn't get lost. Right. So that was one of the first use cases that we deployed immediately was the slip and falls and the slip and fall risk with detection, like water on the floor or wires going across the area or anything that would be in the way of people that would be walking that could cause an issue. Secondly, we're able to look at time spent in different areas. If somebody's kind of loitering around, labor and delivery area, that's where you see a lot of issues. We're able to kind of maybe not report, to dispatch a security guard to the area, but we're able to have it pop up on the main screen and say, hey, we AI has noticed this person's standing outside of this room that's never entered, or is standing outside the labor and delivery area that's never entered, or standing outside a shipping and receiving door at the business that hasn't entered, and maybe they're waiting for that next person to pop the door open and they just wave and walk in. And we see a lot of people entering premises that way. And really, how do you detect that, right? I don't
Yeah.
think you're humans nowadays that's staring at cameras that see somebody outside of a shipping and receiving door smoking a cigarette, right? Isn't going to say, hey, is that Johnny, right? Because maybe there's 40 employees that would normally be outside that zone. AI is able to determine like where did this person come from? How long have they been standing here? Does this look like something we should be paying attention to? And then send that flag, send that alert, right, to maybe your SOC, your security operations center that is surveying cameras. Or if you don't have one of those, if you're, waiting for the alert, then it'll send that alert to whoever you determine and say, hey, we've detected a potential threat, right? So that's other ways that we've seen it being used in healthcare and a few other facilities. Um, and again, tagging back to with the access control system, if somebody's entering a facility or entering an area that they don't have authorization to. And a lot of times you get that by them walking behind somebody that did have authorization into that area. So we'll
Yeah.
call it. So
Now I think about that restricted area piece. We were just talking about some things even yesterday, right? Where, um, look, I think a lot of organizations maybe they weren't maybe properly mapped originally from a coverage perspective. Maybe it's not ideal in terms of like camera placement and like, but there are some things that you can do immediately with AI that at least start to reduce some of that risk. Where okay, I might need to add 5, 6 doors of access control and maybe add 3 or 4 additional cameras to get the coverage that I ideally need. But maybe we don't have the budget for those things today, but we're also deploying some different AI tools that can help alleviate that risk in a more timely fashion today through like proactive alerting. You mentioned, like a perfect example I think about sometimes is like, you don't even think about like the shipping area where, you might enter a facility or somebody comes in. There's not always somebody checking that area. You think about the doors always being left open. And then like before you know it, somebody could go through 3 doors and end up in labor and delivery, for instance,
So
like
this
just
was a real thing, right? So this was actually discovered on a walkthrough I was at yesterday for a very large major hospital who thought they were doing everything right, have access control throughout the facility, have cameras throughout the facility. This was their shipping and receiving area, and we found that the way to get into the shipping and receiving area was a gate that was along the road. So traditionally, they would press a intercom button, talk back and forth. The gate would slide open, and then there was no access control to the door into that shipping area because they determined, well, they had to get through that gate to get in. So the issue was when we were walking the facility yesterday, the driver had left and the gate hadn't closed yet. So now, even though this facility does have weapons detection systems to get into all the main entrances, somebody could have been able to walk right off the side road, walk into the shipping and receiving door that was unlocked. Straight ahead of us was med supplies. To our left was the cafeteria, and to our right was a elevator that when you walked on, there was no access control to use the elevator. We got off on the first floor, and labor and deliveries on my right. So this was a real use case that we brought up and said, hey, wouldn't it be good to know that if somebody came walking up this road instead of driving, right? So immediately we could be employing AI to determine if somebody came walking off the street to get into that door, did they pull up a truck, right? And then secondly, we employed them to put access control on the elevator. If nowhere else, let's put access control on the elevator to say you have to have credentials to leave the shipping and receiving area to enter the main hospital. If you want to get in, go around the front and be screened like everybody else for a weapon. So these are real use cases. These are real things that we're seeing every day now that I think maybe in the past it just was kind of an oversight. They thought they had it locked down and secure. And as we're seeing incidents, escalating from all over the country now, we're starting to find that there is ways
yeah,
that we could be preventing it better with AI.
agreed. some other use case I want to go into, and I think, look, some of this might be a little redundant, but there are, so a couple topics here that we didn't really cover that I think, are worth highlighting, right? And I think, look, we talked about PPE, we talked about your forklifts, but one thing wouldn't mind touching on is just like production line intelligence. What are some ways AI is helping manufacturing or industrial clients on the production line?
Absolutely. So we have a very large client today that has this in place, that has conveyor belts that's moving equipment. And the biggest issue with conveyor belts is, right, you do get some things that cause issues, that cause bottlenecks or cause jams. And if it's taking, multiple employees to watch, 12 different lines for jams, right, this is cost, right? So we're using AI to determine in real time any things that has stopped moving that were moving before. So we got a jam or we have a potential jam. They start seeing things that's in the line or on the way, in the way of the line that would cause an issue. So we're able to alert immediately. So now we can start looking at reducing some headcount, reducing some staff that's maybe not needed, due to AI being able to detect these things faster. Or if you leave the same amount of staff, right, again, you get to stop worrying about employee fatigue, where they've been staring at a screen for 8 to 9, sometimes in these plants, 12-hour shifts, and say it's hour 10, right? And they're not staring at the all 8 cameras at the same time. That's really hard for any individual to do in hour one. So now you start getting that employee fatigue or human fatigue, and AI doesn't. So we're able to determine potential issues before they happen or issues real time. And then we can tie that all the way back down through the line, depending on capabilities, to even pause the line, right? So we're able to stop issues from happening before they happen or mitigate those issues immediately by having cameras in the correct places and the right AI tools on top of it to determine issues.
Okay. Look, I think there's a ton of different use cases too, right? Even as far as like helping reduce shortage, I think there's other times where, we're not necessarily using surveillance, but maybe an organization has 3 or 4 different machines with, that maybe do the same thing or same task. But we're looking at time on that machine. We're looking at data in a different way, and we're looking at it and saying like, oh, well, this machine, this operator is that much faster, right? But all of a sudden, when you're tying that into your surveillance system and you're leveraging AI, you can see things a little differently that are not just the zeros and ones behind it, but why is it that much faster, right? So like I think data only tells you when and the where. It doesn't necessarily tell you the why. And I think AI is really helping solve the why behind some of those problems.
Just giving you a lot more data at your hands, right?
Yeah.
Instead of right, to get all that information, how many hours would it take somebody sitting there watching video or overseeing an entire workshop floor or your personal employee floor to get that data? We're able to deliver that data immediately.
Yeah. Just to take action faster, So
Right.
look, I think this is a little more broad, right? I think this is kind of going to lead us into some good Q&A, right? But it's just like, with some open discussion, what are clients asking for in general? It doesn't even have to be industry specific. Look, I've listed a few things that, I've noticed, whether it's service tickets or inquiries, but what are some things that you're seeing that like clients are really asking for?
Yeah, we're starting to get into pushing again more towards the proactive cameras and proactive systems. A lot of times now that we recently started doing is putting some of these service tickets, as you said, putting some of these issues, running those through AI and trying to determine common causes, right? So now we don't want to just be reactive to issues, right? So we're trying to take the steps on our end, um, as we're doing with the cameras on the client front. And we're trying to be proactive on our side and trying to see, if we've had these clients and these service tickets for a year or two, what's the most common service ticket? What's the reoccurring theme here? And how can we fix that for the long-term fix, right? So we're employing AI on our side, to help mitigate a lot of the issues that we're seeing. From the client side, it's kind of started with, the motion detection, right? We don't want to eat up a lot of camera usage or a lot of alerts with detecting false alerts. So AI kicking into there is one of your biggest ones. And the big question going into a lot of meetings nowadays is, do we want to go cloud with our system or do we want to be on-prem? Right.
That's a big
So
one. That's a big
I
one.
think I think that is our most common conversation. We're starting to see the huge shift towards cloud. Everything is kind of moving towards cloud. And look, with these AI data centers popping up every day all over the country, all over the world, I think it's just going to continue that shift. I think a lot of people were originally scared of the word cloud. Hey, where'd my data go? Like, who has it? Right? Where is it? Hey guys, it's still living in a server. It's just not on your premise, right? So it's not living in the clouds. It's not magically happening. That's what these data centers are popping up for. Um, a lot of that is reducing a lot of overhead costs for on-prem deployment, right? So now we don't have to worry about another machine on site that we have to life cycle and manage. And then you open up for a few other integrations with cloud. So I think that's usually our biggest conversation and talking point when going in with clients today is why cloud or why not?
Can you still use some of these AI features and functionality, with on-prem?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best part with the AI is you're not getting limited to even specific product nowadays. Now there is some legacy product out there that I'd say we probably can't put AI on, but that doesn't stop you from if you haven't purchased cameras from In-Telecom, if you have, 4 or 5 year old cameras, we even still have the ability today with some of the products and tools that we have to give you a lot of what we showed as far as the AI data and the AI capabilities without coming out and doing a whole rehaul and refresh of your entire camera system. Now, I'm say that with a grain, right? It doesn't always work. There are some things that would be exceptions. Some of the older legacy items or legacy products may not be capable. But for the most part, probably 90%, 95% of the products that we walk into today, that even if we haven't sold it, if they bought it from another vendor 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years ago, we still have the capability of employing these AI products and these AI tools without replacing every product in the building. So that's usually our second topic is if we're not ready to replace all the cameras, we're not ready to do that big upgrade, we can get you started with some AI, get you some features going as we plan for the future of doing some refreshments.
Look, I think you bring up a really good point. That's also, a good transition into a little bit of open discussion. You know, I think where some companies or organizations are really struggling today on the AI front is I think everybody wants to use AI, right? But they don't really know where to start. They don't have maybe executive buy-in today from a strategy standpoint or some AI ownership, or maybe they don't even have, individuals at all identified that are they're AI champions within the organization that are leading these initiatives, right? So number one, I think you have to have some form of executive leadership that is playing a role in driving AI adoption within the organization. Because you can deploy all the tools out of the box that you want, right? But adoption is going to suffer if these aren't major initiatives, right? I also think that we can't build for the sake of building, right? Like you have to really do these user journeys, refer to them as like with the stakeholders that are going to be using these tools. So you're developing not based on theory, but on like real world like use cases of how the team and the system is functioning today. If not, you're building and then you don't have adoption and people don't use them because it wasn't built for their tasks, the things that they need it for. So I always like to tell people like the biggest barrier or that's like slowing AI adoption within the company is the lack of strategy and then like not starting with an AI assessment. right? Like
Right.
you have to have this foundation in place of like, okay, we're going to adopt AI. We're not stopping it. Like we're going to get on board, but like where do we start? And I always tell people it's an assessment. Would you agree with
Right.
some of that?
Yeah, and it comes in with the question of like, hey, what are your issues today? And let's see, can AI help those? Right. So it's not always let's jump in and deploy it and see what happens. It's actually the opposite. We want to ask what are the issues? What are some of the pain points with your security capabilities and interactions today? And let's have an open discussion of how AI could help either solve or mitigate time, right? With your current issues today. It's not always let's just jump in and deploy, right? That's really the last thing we want to do because then we're working backwards. So a lot of these AI tools and capabilities, um, we're going to customize as needed for each individual organization. So we really have to start with an assessment. That's going to be always step one. Is a meeting and hopefully like you said with some of the leadership involved to hear their feedback and their concerns and where they see their organization and industry going, and that's when we would start the open discussion of how AI could help or how some of the tools that we provide could help. um, and that's where we would build from. Maybe we don't start with everything all at once, but maybe we build a roadmap, right? It doesn't have to be all at once. There's always ways to start slow and then build into it.
Yeah, look, I think it's just similar to development, right? And I think anybody who's been in the world of development, has heard the phrase tech debt, right? So like what happens is you develop, you spend all this money, and the problem you thought you needed to solve is not really the problem you needed to solve. Right. So that becomes a sunk cost, and like what you refer to as tech debt. So it's like develop stuff that you'll never use, the team will never use. So I always suggest to people, like just kind of reiterating that is just like, let's assess, right? Let's make sure we have the right stakeholders in the conversation. Let's make sure we're meeting with the right individuals that are going to be part of these rollouts, this development to make sure we're doing this the right way. And I think starting small is always the best part, right? Where um, I don't need to automate 100% of something, right? Like let's start with like the most troublesome 10%, right? That's gonna give us that immediate ROI that's gonna gain the buy-in.
Right. Want to see the value, want to see how it works right away. And so we're going to do that with your biggest pain point and your smallest place that we can start, right? And show you the capabilities, right? But that all comes from that assessment. So
Yep.
can't figure it out without having that assessment and that open dialogue of issues, where we're going, what's going on today, and what we see going on in the future, right? What's next year and 3 years from now look like? Let's not just look at today.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I think we're gonna pause here, right? We'll give everybody about a minute, right? We'll have some awkward silence for 60 seconds or so, and see if anybody's got any questions that they'd like to ask. Um, Chris has all the answers if anybody's curious.
That's what you say, apparently. Not they, just you.
All
So
right,
you
Gilbert's
see.
got the first question there. So, Chris, what AI company are we using? Anyone better than the other?
So great question, right? It's going to start with that open assessment before we determine which AI company to use. So we would have that discussion, find out what your needs are, what your concerns are. A lot of times, some of the AI that's needed in about 75 to 80% of the use cases is actually already within the camera systems. The camera platform that we use most common is Motorola. So we're a big Avigilon house, and a lot of the capabilities that we talked about today, probably 75% of them are built within the Motorola platform. And it's just all about designing it for your use cases and how you need it to operate within your facility and your organization. From there, we recently onboarded another product that integrates with Motorola really well and actually integrates with a lot of camera platforms called Dragonfree. So that's the last one that we deployed. Um, for a large majority of those weird, forklift joisting kind of needs. The company is called Dragon Fruit. But is one better than the other? It really it comes down to what your needs are, exactly what you're trying to solve, and then make sure that the products, that we're discussing today meet those needs. And if not, then there is a ton of AI companies out there that we work with day to day, and have seen deployed.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Look, and I think it's about having the right integrator too,
Yeah.
right? So, there's so many different products today. Look, I think, like you said, 70-80% of the things you really want to accomplish are like native to the system today, and like the AI feature functionality that they already have deployed. Maybe we don't, you know, every end user doesn't know those things are accessible or available or how to use them properly, right? So sometimes it's just coming in with the right integrator that's coming, coach, train, and provide continuous education, on that front, and you're already able to accomplish some baseline things that are going to get you that ROI pretty quickly. But I think there's also, those little bit tougher challenges where you're going to need to layer some additional pieces of software on top. So.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think, Ben hit the nail on the head. The integrator is the biggest part, especially when it comes to writing these AI codes and launching, right? A lot of it is native to a lot of the systems that's out there, but a lot of times you come across your vendors or integrators in the security industry today that are old school, that are run a wire, plug a camera into both ends, turn the system on and say, hey, here you go. We're having a network issue. That means you got to call your network company and have them come take a look at it, right? And now we got to take down firewalls and open up ports for forwarding to get the video feed out. It really comes down to your vendor's capabilities and their experience and expertise with networking and with the AI systems themselves, to make sure you're getting all of out everything out of the system that you have in place, and then to make sure that they can deploy and integrate those additional AI features.
One thing that I think is important, the reference made me think about it, is just like how important a knowledge base is too, a documentation library associated with this development, with these features and functionality and how to's. And, I think one thing that I've seen a lot is, you know, all that subject matter expertise may be in one individual's head, right, within the company. And, unfortunately, life does happen, and things happen. And whether that person's no longer with the organization, or whatever that looks like, that knowledge base is still with that individual, right? And it's really, really important to have that documentation library somewhere that it is retaining all of this data and information.
Yeah, great point.
Cool. Look like we have any other questions. So, look, I appreciate everybody again for joining. Chris, I really enjoyed the conversation today. So everybody that attended today, we're gonna, we'll send this out. We'll also send out a way for you to schedule an assessment if that's something you're interested in. We'll get Chris and his team and you guys on the calendar, and we'll take it from there. But appreciate the time today, Chris.
Yeah, thanks again, Ben, and thank all y'all for joining. Appreciate it.
Okay.